There you are again, watching how the person who keeps you up at night falls in love with someone else while you hold their phone so they can take the perfect photo with their new conquest. You wonder what that other person has that you don't. Why you're always the safe option, the shoulder to cry on, the midnight confidant, but never the chosen one. And the most painful thing isn't just that they don't see you as a romantic option, but that you yourself have started to believe that's your natural place in the world. The eternal second choice, the consolation prize, the friend. But let me tell you something that will change your perspective forever. You're not just the friend by chance, nor because you lack attractiveness, nor because the universe has conspired against you. You're the friend because you've unconsciously chosen that role as an emotional survival mechanism, and that choice says more about your deep psychology than you imagine. The friend zone isn't a place where others put you. It's a refuge you build yourself to protect yourself from direct rejection, from real risk, from the authentic vulnerability that love requires. Carl Jung spoke of the concept of the shadow, that part of ourselves we repress because we don't want to face it. For many who live eternally in the friend zone, their shadow contains a terrifying truth. They prefer the safety of unrequited love to the uncertainty of real love. Because when you love in secret, when you're the eternal confidant, you have all the emotional advantages without any of the risks. You have intimacy without commitment, closeness without vulnerability, the illusion of love without the real possibility of definitive rejection. Think about it. When you're the friend, you always have hope. There's always a door left ajar. There's always the possibility that someday they'll realize. But if you confess and get rejected, that door closes forever. And therein lies the most subtle psychological mechanism. You unconsciously sabotage your own romantic opportunities because you prefer the sweet agony of eternal possibility to the bitter certainty of no. This dynamic is built on three fundamental pillars that define your emotional experience and behavior patterns. The first pillar is what psychologists call disguised conditional love. When you're always the friend, you don't love the person, you love the idea of the person. You love their potential to love you back. You love the version of them that exists in your mind. You love the romantic story you've built in your head, where they eventually realize you were the right one from the beginning. This conditional love disguises itself as altruism. You convince yourself that your feelings are pure, selfless, noble. I love them so much, I just want their happiness, you tell yourself, while internally hoping that happiness will eventually include being with you. But real love doesn't expect reward, has no hidden agenda, doesn't feed on the fantasy of future reciprocity. When you truly love someone, you want what's best for them, even if that doesn't include you. And more importantly, you respect their autonomy to choose, without pressuring them with your undeclared emotional agenda. The second pillar is rejection avoidance through self-rejection. This sounds paradoxical, but it's extraordinarily common. Many people who live perpetually in the friend zone reject themselves before others can do it. They place themselves in the friend category as a way to control the narrative. They didn't reject me because I never really tried, they tell themselves. I'm in the friend zone because I'm too good, too respectful, too noble for romance games. This narrative allows them to keep their self-esteem intact while avoiding the terror of genuine vulnerability. Because confessing, really trying, requires courage. It requires being willing to be seen completely, judged completely, and potentially rejected completely. It's much safer psychologically to create a story where you're a victim of circumstances than the protagonist of your own emotional cowardice. The third pillar, and perhaps the deepest, is what Jung would call an unresolved self-worth wound. People who chronically end up in the friend zone often don't believe, deep in their being, that they deserve to be chosen first. They've internalized from an early age the message that they're the type of person you support, but not the one you stay with. Maybe they were the less favored sibling. Maybe they were ignored in childhood. Maybe they learned that their value resided solely in how useful they could be to others. When you don't believe you deserve to be someone's first choice, you unconsciously behave in ways that confirm that belief. You become indispensable as a friend, but invisible as a potential partner. You offer unlimited emotional support. You're available 24 hours. You listen to all their problems, celebrate all their successes, but you never position yourself as someone who has their own boundaries, needs, desires, and dignity. You become an emotional resource rather than an emotional equal. This dynamic creates a toxic cycle where the same generosity you think makes you attractive is what makes you romantically invisible. Because when someone can have all the benefits of your love without any of the responsibilities, when they can cry on your shoulder and then leave with someone else, when they can use your emotional support as a springboard to other relationships, why would they change that situation? Not out of malice, but because human beings naturally take the path of least emotional resistance. This is where we arrive at the most painful but also most liberating revelation. You're not a victim of the friend zone, you're its architect. Every time you accept being the confidant of their romantic problems with others, every time you celebrate their new relationships while dying inside, every time you say, "I just want you to be happy," when you really want to scream, "Choose me," you're building the walls of your own emotional prison. But here's the transformative discovery that will change your life. You're not just the friend because you're not attractive, interesting, or valuable enough. You're the friend because you've learned to love without risk, to desire without vulnerability, to dream without action. You've turned love into a mental pastime rather than a lived experience. And the problem isn't that they don't love you back. The problem is that you've never really loved forward. Think about this. How many times have you been genuinely present with the person you love, without agenda, without secret hope, without calculating every gesture to see if you might be advancing towards something romantic? How many times have you interacted with them simply as human beings, instead of as the object of your undeclared romantic project? The answer will probably surprise you, because when you're trapped in the friend zone, you rarely see the real person in front of you. You see your own emotional need projected onto them. This projection creates a cruel irony. The more love you feel toward them, the less you really know them, because your love is based on your fantasy of what they could be for you, not on the reality of who they are. You love the idea of being loved by them more than you love their true essence, their real flaws, their complete humanity. And at some unconscious level, they feel this difference. They feel that you're not relating to them, but to your idealized version of them, and that however flattering it might seem superficially, doesn't generate genuine romantic attraction. Romantic attraction requires seeing and being seen, not idealizing and being idealized. It requires authentic presence, not emotional performance. It requires mutual vulnerability, not unilateral emotional service. And it requires, above all, two people who choose each other as equals, not one person who becomes the other is emotional resource, hoping that eventually that service will transform into love. This is where what psychologists call emotional differentiation comes into play. Emotionally differentiated people know where they end and others begin. They don't need to be indispensable to feel valuable. They don't need to be needed to feel loved. They don't need to be useful to feel worthy. They can offer support without becoming emotional crutches. They can love without losing themselves in the process. They can desire without desperating over the outcome. When you learn emotional differentiation, something magical happens. You stop being the friend because you stop needing to be. You no longer use friendship as an indirect romantic strategy. You no longer offer emotional support with the secret agenda of eventually being reciprocated. When you interact with someone you're attracted to, you can do it from your own emotional center, with your own clear boundaries, with your own dignity intact. This doesn't mean you become cold or calculating. It means you become authentic. And authenticity, unlike utility, does generate attraction. Because when someone interacts with you and feels you're present as a complete person, not as an emotional function, when they feel you have your own life, your own boundaries, your own identity beyond your relationship with them, that creates respect. And respect is the foundation of lasting romantic attraction. The transformation from chronic friend zone isn't about learning seduction techniques or dating strategies. It's about an internal revolution where you stop seeking external validation and start cultivating genuine self-respect. It's about moving from "I hope they choose me" to "I am selective about who I choose." It's about transforming "why am I not enough" into "does this person add real value to my life?" When you make this internal transformation, something extraordinary happens. People start seeing you differently because you see yourself differently. You're no longer the always available emotional resource. You're no longer the safe backup plan. You're no longer the one celebrating others' romances while sacrificing your own. You become someone with options, with standards, with your own life. And paradoxically, this makes you infinitely more attractive than when you were desperately available. But here's the most beautiful part of this transformation. When you finally exit chronic friend zone, when you finally learn to relate from dignity instead of desperation, you discover that real love is completely different from what you had imagined. It's not the desperate validation you were seeking. It's not the confirmation of your worth you needed. It's not the prize you expected to win after so much emotional service. Real love is mutual recognition between equals. It's two people who choose each other freely and consciously, not because one needs to be saved and the other needs to be needed, but because both enrich each other from the abundance of their own individual completeness. It's intimacy without agenda, closeness without desperation, commitment without loss of identity. And here's the final irony. When you no longer need to exit the friend zone because you've built a life so rich and complete that love is a beautiful addition, but not a desperate necessity, that's when you naturally stop ending up there. Because people are attracted to those who are complete in themselves, not to those who need to complete themselves through others. The friend zone, then, isn't your destiny. It's your teacher. It teaches you about personal dignity, about emotional boundaries, about the difference between authentic love and need disguised as love. It teaches you that the problem was never that you weren't good enough to be chosen, but that you hadn't chosen yourself enough to stop needing others' choice to feel valuable. When you integrate this lesson, when you really live it in your body and not just understand it in your mind, your romantic life transforms completely. Not because you learn tricks or strategies, but because you become a fundamentally different person. You become someone who loves from abundance instead of deficit, who relates from curiosity instead of need, who offers companionship instead of seeking completeness. And in that space of authentic transformation, you discover that the love that arrives is infinitely more satisfying than the love you desperately pursued. Because finally, you're not trying to fill an internal void through another person. Finally, you're sharing your completeness with someone else, creating something beautiful together instead of trying to extract validation from them. This is the real exit from the friend zone. Not finding someone who finally chooses you as first option, but becoming someone who chooses themselves with such clarity and dignity that they naturally attract people who operate from the same level of self-respect and emotional completeness.